Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Timothy O'Brien from the New Zealand Film Commission, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you here today. The Film Commission has an annual distribution seminar, and this year it's taking place in Auckland, the main event, and it's about new media, marketing and distribution, and also what's happening to old type of distribution and all of the current issues that no doubt you're interested in by being here. So we're very lucky that we're able to have this little brief encounter in Wellington to talk about some of these issues. It'll be a fairly free-form event that I'll start out by talking with our three guests a little bit, and then after about half an hour or so I'll throw it open to your questions and we can take it from there. So first of all, I'll just introduce you to everybody, starting with closest to me is Jason Janego, who's head of legal and business affairs at Magnolia Pictures. Jason's just arrived from New York.
Just arrived from New York.
New York. So he's we're very glad that he was able to join in as well. Also Magnolia, I think the last New Zealand film you're involved in was The World's Fastest Indian.
The World's Fastest Indian, yes.
Yeah, so one of our big ones of recent times.
Yes.
Next to him is Andy Friedman, who's come from London. He is from Substance PR and is involved in online marketing and promotion, and does a lot of work for studios in particular. So he's sort of at the big end of the business compared with Brian Chills, our final guest, who's really about independent marketing and distribution and how to get attention for those lower budget projects. But he's also worked with filmmakers like John Sayles in organising sort of independent distribution of his film. So I'm going to start with a really dumb question for each person, and perhaps just starting with Jason, perhaps if you just describe for us what exactly it is you do and how you're kind of involved in the current distribution environment.
Yes, I am part of a very unique organization in the United States. It's a group of companies that are owned by two billionaires. You may or may not know who these people are. One's Mark Cuban and the other is Todd Wagner. And they've put together a group of entertainment properties, from production to traditional distribution. We have a production company. Magnolia Pictures is a distribution company. We have a home entertainment division called Magnolia Home Entertainment, obviously. We own a theater chain in the United States called Landmark, which is the largest art house theater chain in the country. We have a self-distribution initiative there called Truly Indie, which is a way for filmmakers to essentially rent the use of theaters if they want to self-distribute their films. We also have two television networks called HDNet and HDNet Movies, which are high-definition programming that are found all over the country. It's in about 8 million households right now. And me personally, I run the business affairs for most of it. The one area that I don't do a lot with anymore is the production side. We have a production company in LA called 2929 Productions, and they produce pretty big films. They've films that you may have heard of, Aquila and the Bee, We Own the Night, Good Night and Good Luck. Those are some of the films that we have a film that actually Magnolia is distributing that's coming out in a couple weeks called What Just Happened. It stars Robert De Niro and Sean Penn and Bruce Willis. So they're producing probably $20 to $30 million budget films, but they're doing it outside of the studio system. Again, it's like this company that we have production, distribution, video, exhibition, television. We have some internet stuff. So it's a pretty unique organization.
Andy?
Substance is, as Tim mentioned, a PR company, online PR company. And that can traditionally be servicing a trailer for an independent film to doing a year to 18-month long campaign for a studio film. We have kind of two real disciplines in the company. One is the PR, so that can be replicating what traditional PR companies do with trailer, clips, talent, images, that kind of thing, and distributing and disseminating that across the internet. And that will be to kind of upfront film sites as well as fan sites and targeted websites as well. And then the other side of the company is a creative shop. So we design websites, we build and design advertising for individual film campaigns. We do viral production, so video production, blogging. Just really running the whole gamut of internet marketing tools for independents and studios.
And Brian?
I have worked on a couple different films. I guess most notably, I worked very closely with Four-Eyed Monsters, with the filmmakers of that, which is a very, very low budget kind of DIY film that played the festival circuit back in 2005, and we distributed the film on our own using. I guess since we didn't have a distributor, we had kind of nothing to lose, so we did a lot of very innovative things. It was the first film that that was featured on YouTube, a whole feature film. We put it right up there, and MySpace Video and a bunch of different places. We played it in Second Life, and we had a theatrical release, this very small release that we did ourselves based on asking our fans for their emails and their postal codes, and we would find where they were located and use that to book theaters in those areas, which was small, but on a per screening basis went very well. We actually came out ahead on that one. Since then, I'm starting up a company called Three-Eyed Labs, which is the goal. I guess it's kind of a production company / technology R&D lab for media projects. So there were a number of software projects that came out of Four-Eyed Monsters and a little bit on how John Sayles' movie, some other things I've worked on that have just been very useful. So the idea is that very often we'll find that we need some new technology that doesn't exist in order to tell the story the way we want to tell it, and we'll create that technology as a prototype, and then afterwards build it out so that other filmmakers and artists can use it. So I have at the moment a couple of web video series in pre-production and in development, and a few software projects that will be coming out before the end of the year, I think.
So I'm just going to pick up on something you said, because one of the things, in a sort of rush of blood to the head, we called this seminar Smashing the Windows,
yeah.
And that's sort of referring to the traditional model of you go into a theatre, then you go into video for sale and video for hire and television and all down through the line. But that model seems to be not working
right.
in the same way. And one of the particular things you have just drawn attention to is the fact of having theatrical distribution or theatrical screenings anyway, after the fact of doing other things. Can you perhaps describe how that worked? Collecting those zip code numbers and things like that.
Sure. Well, the original push with the zip codes we hadn't put the film online by that point. It had played in film festivals and that was it. We had a lot of resistance from theaters in doing that, which a lot of that is, this was back in 2006. A lot of that I think is still there. I'm seeing some other filmmakers try to do similar stuff, and they're still getting a lot of pushback. But I think it's not quite as bad as it was when we were doing it. It's very hard. I think there's not a lot of reason that, at least for an independent film, and I think eventually all films, I think you can, as far as the audience is concerned, have screenings in theaters after your film is on DVD or download or even for free on the internet. There are a lot of other films that have done things like that, but I think that the challenge is dealing with the theater owners themselves, because they're, maybe you can speak about, I'm sure you can speak about this, but they're, some of them are more, I guess, Marco is always talking about day and date, right? But I think some of them are really, really scared. I try to, the way I see it, I think if you're a theater owner, and what you're saying is, I think you have to look at what's valuable to the audience, right? Forget about everybody else. Everybody else is either they serve you getting your film to your audience, or they stop you from getting your film to the audience. And as far as the audience is concerned, they want to see it how they want to see it. And if a theater owner says, the only value I have to offer you is that I'll show your movie, but I'm actually blocking it from seeing it the way you really want to see it, then I think that the theaters are going to suffer for that. But if your value is, I have a social experience, and it's on a way bigger screen than you have at home, and sort of all that kind of quality of experience things, then I think people will start to kind of see that that's a more valuable thing to offer to audiences.
I mean, Jason, do you want to pick up?
Yeah.
on that?
First of all, I'm trying to get a set. I know a bit about how some of this stuff works in other countries. Obviously, I deal mostly with the U.S. and Canada, and having worked on Indian, I obviously have some experience with some of the New Zealand from the production side. But as far as the windows go, and what sort of technologies that you guys are using, I'm not completely versed on it. So if we refer to something that doesn't make sense to anybody, somebody like holler and try to explain it. As far as the basic concept of smashing the windows, as you said, Tim, the basic idea behind what traditional windows would be is theatrical is the driver for everything else. And there's a reason why everything else is called ancillary markets, is because they're ancillary to what the theatrical release does. So it would traditionally go theatrical, there'd be a non-theatrical release, which would be considered when you see a film on a hotel or in an airplane, or if you do a booking like at a museum or something like that. After that would come the home video release, which would be somewhere between 4 to 6 months after the theatrical release. And then you would do VOD, which is video on demand. Pay-per-view would usually come somewhere probably about 45 days after the video is concerned. And then the first television window would be the paid television window, would occur probably about 6 months after the video release. And then the free TV, which would be over-the-air television, would be anywhere from a year to 2 years, depending upon whether the pay TV thing happened. So the idea behind smashing the windows is there a way that makes more sense for the film, for the distributor, for the exhibitor, for everyone, to take that traditional model and flip it on its head, smash it together? Who knows? What my company tried to do, and the first film that we tried doing it on, is a film by Steven Soderbergh, very small film called Bubble, which is a film that he shot for about $1.5 million. It was all done digitally. It was all done in HD. Non-professional actors. And the concept was something called day and date. And I'm sure a lot of you probably are aware of that terminology. The idea behind day and date is to release things on the same day, and it's different windows on the same day. And so we tried doing it and because of the way our company's set up, we could actually do this. We did it in theaters, we did it on DVD, we did it on television, all at the exact same time. And the thinking behind it was that as a distributor, what you do is you minimize your costs to market and release the film, because instead of having to go through the whole process three or four times, you do it once. And you're still getting the benefits of the review in the New York Times. You're getting the exposure you might get for one of these smaller films. Now, what ended up happening is that the film completely underperformed. And you could say it's because it's a small film. You could say because it was a crappy film. You could say, there's a lot of, who knows? But what that experiment proved, if anything, with that particular film was there was this large market for people who watch movies in hotels. And that was like something that we never really kind of thought that, and I don't know whether it's because the movie started with the letter B, so it was one of the first ones you saw, or what, but that movie did better in hotels than it did theatrically. It might even did better than it did on video. So
this is when you're in the hotel and it says $14.95.
That's right.
Per movie.
So, we learned a little lesson from that and tweaked the model. And so, I don't know, this is like this weird anecdote, but I guess the idea is that the model is still evolving and it keeps changing. And to answer your question as far as your point on the theatrical side of things, so why would theaters agree to do this? In the United States, and I imagine in New Zealand, Australia, Europe, everywhere, the theatrical business is dying. People aren't going to the movies the way they once did. And especially, unfortunately, for small independent films. And so, as a theater owner, there's only so much I can charge for a bucket of popcorn. But those screens are really precious. And so the idea is if I can have Batman playing on one of my screens, even though it's playing down the street too, versus some little obscure film that people might not have heard of, I'm probably going to pick Batman. And I know that's terrible, but that's a problem. And so what's happening is you have this fight to survive. And so the idea of trying to maintain the windows from a theatrical from an exhibition standpoint is because you want to make sure that if I'm booking your movie on my screen, which is a very valuable screen, that you can't sit home and watch that movie on your computer. You can't sit home and watch that movie on your television set. So that's we don't do that. We do anything at our theater chain. But that's the thinking that happens for the Regals and like the AMCs, which are the big chains in the United States.
So that's what you're talking about when you refer to the theatre blocking you seeing it the way you want to see it.
And this happens, sometimes it's surprising. I mean, there's a theater in Texas that has, it's called the Alamo Draft House. I don't know if any of you guys, well, I'm sure you guys have been, but they have, they serve food and drinks. So like every row, you have this like table across, and they do all kinds of cool stuff there. They do group sing-alongs. Like they had a screening with all like Justin Timberlake videos with the words across the bottom. I didn't go, but they have like these very social activities, and I think it's like you would never go to a bar that says, "Oh, I'm sorry, we can't give you this kind of beer because it's available to buy in the store and bring home." And you would go to a bar and you pay more at the bar for that beer because you're in a social experience. And I think, something like the Alamo Draft House is great because they really do make it a more social experience. And, you go and you have this food, which is okay. It's not like amazing, but, it's just it's a more fun way to see a film. But I was surprised then when a friend of mine, they asked her to show her film there, and, she said that she was going to kind of do a very, very small DVD release, mostly just kind of selling it by hand, and they said, no, we can't do it. But I think to kind of address something that you were talking about, Jason, as far as, these issues where you have like Batman, and then you have your small little independent film, I think one huge potential to kind of help solve that is I think there's a problem with this standard idea of the week-long booking. Do you guys do that here as well? It's like every Wednesday or Friday they change it up, and that schedule runs for the week, and your movie plays anywhere from 3 to 5 times a day. And for a lot of small films, I mean that's just you're going to have all these empty theaters. And when we did our release, we did them in the kind of biggest rollout was in 6 cities in the United States, one show per week on Thursday night. And those did, like per show, they did really, really well. I mean, it was like the first week in September, it was the worst week of the year if you kind of graph the rest of the year as far as like how theatrical films do. But because we had those like individual shows, we were able to pack the house, we do a party afterwards. It becomes, really, really, does really, really well per show. And I remember we were talking about this yesterday. If there was the sequel to the Garfield movie, with his animated, that Bill Murray was doing the voice, that was showing the same week, and on that same day, that movie made on average, I think, what was it, like $17?
$12 or $17.
$17 American per day per theater. Now, if you figure that movie's playing, 3 to 5 times per day, that comes out to about $6-7, which is less than the price of one ticket. So you've got all these empty rooms showing this movie, and for some reason, there's this, I guess, what do you want to call it, outdated model of everything has to show in those week-long blocks. I think if we can kind of break it up a little bit, that would certainly help things.
Let's get to talking about, since we've sort of got to the point of, there are too many independent films, basically, using independent as a sort of these smaller films that would have once played in an art house
there are too many bad independent films. Seriously, there could never be too many films. If they're all amazing, then,
Right. But even of ones that do get the theatrical window, I mean, I can remember last November at AFM looking in the LA Times, and there were 18 pictures opening that weekend or something, which sort of seems ridiculous. And presumably that's what's the multiple of that for the other films that are out there. So how does a film that does have some merit get to break through to either be a Brian type of film, or a film that's a sort of solid independent film? Start with Andy talking about some of the marketing.
As
questions.
Jason says, it's got to be good in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean, you can sell it and sell it and sell it, but if the picture's not good, the audience isn't going to come. And word of mouth is a big thing around that. And you can use the internet, and you can use these these new disciplines to try and spread the word. But bad buzz spreads quicker than good buzz. So
So can you perhaps describe, as a sort of, what is an internet campaign now? Because I guess there was a point where you click through and see the trailer and wait for 10 minutes while the little thing spins around until it turns up.
Sure.
What else happens now?
Well, obviously, since the proliferation of social networks and the Facebooks and the MySpaces of this world, there's been a kind of bandwagon to jump on there, especially from the studios. I think from a DIY perspective, what Brian did with Four Eyed Monsters is that he had the time to work with the film, and that was in terms of getting in there early and working with the film when it was in production or even before it was in production. I think that's something that Brian's going to go on to as well. But the studios seem to think that you can hijack this technology 2 months before, or even shorter before the release, and get that buzz going and get that word of mouth going, and it just doesn't work. Ostensibly, people are using the internet for all sorts of different things. Entertainment's a big part of that, but you can't just force that on someone and then expect that buzz to grow that quickly. I think that especially with independent filmmaking, you've got to get in there earlier. And if you can work, it doesn't matter if you're not doing it pre-production. Not everyone's got the resource and the time and the facilities to do that. But even if you're in the edit suite after towards the end of the shoot, and you start getting some material out there and getting that buzz out there earlier, that's one of the crucial ways, and it's relatively inexpensive to start to break through.
Yeah, when I first met Brian, and this has kind of turned out to be a very hot topic for producers, the notion of marketing your film while you were making it. A lot of people at Cinemat Rotterdam said, but traditionally, I'm going to sell this into this territory, and the distributor in that territory is going to do the publicity. If I've done the publicity, aren't I screwing my chance of selling the territory?
It depends if you've got a deal in place, I guess. We had a really great example of a film that had a sale in the UK through Verve Pictures. Didn't have any other territories in the world. And we came on just at the, I think there was reshoots just about to start, and we got together with the director, and he really wanted to push this film, so we said, why don't you start a blog? And it's obviously been quite a frustrating process for you already. Why don't you start to document it? And so we did, and we started to document it from the reshoot process, then to final picture lock, and then into the marketing campaign. And what he found, he had Gillian Anderson in the movie, so he had a web-friendly presence in there, and he knew that he could get, a bit of noise started, fans would come to this site and start to spread the word about this film. Actually what happened is that there was fans from the States coming on, and you could, as it got bigger and bigger, you could show that to his sales agent, and they finally got a release via Sony in the States. From one of the blog was one of the tools that they took to the distributor and said, hey, look, there's an audience for it, and people want to see this movie. And then when it finally got picked up by other territories, he then used the blog to say, okay, it's been picked up by Spain, Italy, wherever. Here are the marketing guys at the distributors in these territories. Go email them, start telling them to do this, and this with the film, and he could galvanize. He had a fan base by that point that he could galvanize and then do some work for him.
So what you're suggesting is that under that model, the interest of the producer is being able to say, well, my film that you say is only got a limited audience. In fact, I can prove that these people came and want to see it.
Sure, absolutely.
So when would you start doing that, and how would you do it? And Jason, jump in too. I think these questions are relevant all over the...
Can I just ask, how would at that kind of, at the pre-production, production level, would a website presence or some sort of marketing that you're generating yourself work against you? Can you clarify how that would potentially?
How would it work against? I don't know. If there was bad blood around the production.
I'll tell you. As a distributor, I disagree with the idea that as a producer that you should be spending your time and money building this this is what the marketing campaign should be. Because as a distributor, anything you do, we're going to look at it and say, we have people to do that. However, the one thing that I always say, and when I do whatever talks like this, is from a producer standpoint, I always would recommend that when you do your budget, set aside $100,000 if you can afford it. No, I'm being this sincerely. Set aside $100,000 as a sort of a backstop exit plan for distribution. Because the idea being that you're going to spend all this time and all this money to make something, to produce a film, and at the end, what are you going to do with it if there's nobody out there who actually wants to do it the way you want to do it? The idea being you have like almost a parachute that you're wearing at the end that says, you know what, if it doesn't work out, and the distributor that, I don't know who's the biggest distributor here, doesn't come along and say, I'm going to give you $10 million for this movie, I can at least figure out a way to get it out there on my own. So rather than take that money and devote it, and again, I'm not necessarily disagreeing, I'm just saying something else.
Sure.
Rather than put that money while you're producing the film and doing this other thing, I would kind of have that as my sort of in my pocket at the end. So I know that if, hey, I might want to hire one of these guys and do it with them, and I got a little bit of money, I don't have to go out and try and hit up my uncle again for more cash.
Right.
It was part of the budget, and it's my exit plan. And if you don't need it, then
Is that what you call it in your budget? Exit.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right about that, Jason. I mean, look, the thing is that your movie, over the lifetime of your movie, there's going to be a certain amount of money that goes into it, and the question is just at what time does that money come? Right? So you first go out there and you say, all right, this is the money I need to make my film, just to get it, in the can and shot and picture lock or whatever, right? And then, if assuming you go the traditional model and you wait for Jason's company or some other company to come in and kind of scoop you up, they're going to throw in the next batch of money. Okay, so that money is coming in one way or another. So if you go the way that Jason's talking about it now, you're just kind of putting that money in earlier, when I think, maybe you can get better terms on that money. I mean, it's sort of, you're going to have that money up front, and you know it's going to be there. So I think the way that I'm looking into structuring future films is to say, okay, set up with whatever your investors, whether it's private equity or whoever you get it from, say, okay, here's the block of money I need to shoot the film and do DIY distribution, and maybe the first block of money comes up front, and then the second block kind of triggers once the film is locked. Because you figure anybody who's putting that money in is taking on a certain amount of risk, right? Especially, the distributor as well. Yeah. I mean, that's why, the deal terms are what they are, which are, sometimes very complicated. So when the film is picture locked, that second batch of money, which maybe you sort of prearranged for, is now at a lower risk because they know that the film is going to be made. But, and then, right, you can say, when you go into negotiation with a distributor, let's say the distributor does come along, you're in a much better position because you can walk away. You can say, yeah I'm going to do this. And plus,
it's nice to have that option.
Right, it's nice to have that option. And you're coming, you're going to the distributor with greater value. Yeah. With a prepared film that you say, this, I know that I'm going to have an audience because I've been building it since I started development.
And one last, and then question, but one last quick point as far as the idea of the production thing. Of course, I could be completely wrong in saying that, and you could be completely right. And just as an example, when you're completely right, I mean, Morgan Spurlock sold Super Size Me based on a poster at Sundance. Like, no one saw that movie. It was sold because he did a kick-ass poster that had a bunch of French fries in his mouth. And that movie sold itself based on that. So it does happen.
It's horses for courses. I mean, with that film we were talking about, it was a case of it had a sale in the UK and it wasn't getting a look in anywhere else. So that's when we came on with the idea. And I think, starting from scratch with it, there's a lot of other things you've got to be concentrating on.
Well, do you guys know Super Size Me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, taking a close-to-home example, Peter Jackson blogging on King Kong from the set. Is that what you're talking about? Is what sorts of, because there's a film that everyone knew who was going to
That's
put
another
it out.
level.
It cost $300 million.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, that was probably planned from the get-go, though, because they ended up
but
selling
like
that
for
as
example, a traditional studio model before Ain't It Cool News or something
Yeah.
would have been don't let anybody see or
Sure,
hear
right.
anything at all until we absolutely control the
Right.
rollout of this production.
Well, maybe I can address that question because this is, there's this challenge that filmmakers, again, maybe you don't want to spend time on marketing, and you can say, well, I don't have time for that, or I'm not interested in it, or I don't want to do it. I always look at your marketing and publicity elements as part of your story. I think that is really, really important, and it's going to you go to a movie. You're not just seeing what's on that screen. Everything that has brought you to that movie, and everything with everybody who's worked on that movie that you recognize from before goes in with you to that theater. And that is part of that story. So for a filmmaker, this is now an opportunity for you to tell that story better, to help kind of shape that. And so I would say, when will it go wrong? When is that bad? I'd say you address that the same way as when you're writing a movie. If you're writing a monster movie and your monster shows up too early, in your first frame, and you take out the surprise, and then that's a badly structured story, then that's a mistake to put that out there too early. If your whole movie, if you're doing The Sixth Sense and there's a surprise at the end, and you blog, before you started shooting what the surprise is, that's going to screw you up. So, I think, that's the only way that I can see where that's a problem. But I prefer to look at it as a tremendous opportunity because you can even, I think, make money off of that marketing, kind of that stuff that was previously called marketing. And we found for Four-Eyed Monsters, the movie was definitely much more valuable than, if you look at it as your average 70-minute, digital video standard def 24p film about two 20-something whiny emo artists in Brooklyn, the movie is not worth that much. But when you kind of add in, the podcast episodes as additional content, which can go on, websites or TV or download or whatever, and you add in this big database of email addresses and MySpace friends and Facebook friends, it's a much more valuable prospect. And we saw that when we started doing deals with people, we saw the numbers were higher for it.
And with Four-Eyed Monsters, didn't you actually sell it by DVD through the web?
Yes, there was.
So in the end, what did the film earn enough money for everybody, or did it do something else?
Yeah, did it?
Well, this is tricky. This is really tricky. There's a couple of kind of elements to this. The first element is that I think a huge amount. The single greatest cost of making this film was just the time of the director's time and my time. We didn't really put out we didn't spend a dime on advertising, like literally nothing. Okay, which was great. We had somebody donated an ad in the New York Times for us for a very, very short, like 2-day theatrical run, and nobody saw the ad. And that's in the tens of thousands of dollars for what that ad would cost. So we didn't buy any ads, and we're very glad we didn't buy any ads. But it was our time, and I think that did we recover the cost of our time? At least in the first kind of chunk. I'm going to get to the second chunk. In the first chunk, no. But I don't regret it because we, so much of it was kind of building up techniques for the future, which I think if you see in Aaron Susan's next film and stuff that I'm going to work on, and coming up, that investment is going to be much, much smaller. I prefer to see it as kind of an R&D effort. The second part of it was that we did do a deal to sell the film to the Independent Film Channel. Do you guys know who that is?
Sorry, which channel?
IFC, Independent Film Channel. It's it's like it's what it sounds like, Independent Film Channel. So we sort of did a deal with them where they were going to give us a chunk of money as an advance or a minimum guarantee on the television and DVD rights for the film, and we signed that deal. This was the deal kind of concluded after I stopped working for them, and that certainly would have, I think, put us over the top. We would have recovered our money from that, and then assuming that had gone well, maybe or maybe not seeing money kind of come in from after that. But due to I guess, a legal dispute. We never got that money, so which is a whole other
Seriously?
story.
yeah.
Was that a dispute with the channel? Or was in the...
What do you mean the channel?
With IFC?
With IFC or between the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was the dispute between?
Oh, there was well, I mean, I guess Aaron has talked about this publicly, so I can talk about it publicly. What happened was that one of the actors, on the day that the DVD was set to come out in stores, like literally that day, one of the somebody who was in one of the podcast episodes sent a letter to the store and to the distributor that said, "You don't have the rights to use my image in this movie," and they freaked out and they pulled it off the shelves. We did actually have the rights, and we had a piece of paper with a contract with his name signed on it, but they apparently didn't care. So I think it's in limbo right now.
And I'm sure the producers didn't have insurance, didn't have an E&O policy.
There was something that I think they were in kind of, they were kind of dealing with they were like in negotiations to get it. I think even if they had it, it wouldn't have covered, because they don't pay out, and they always say like, oh, that doesn't count under our terms, so that I think the policy wouldn't have done
This
anything.
business is too damn expensive.
Yeah.
I'm empathetic to like filmmakers. It's like all the stuff you got to do and pay for and all the rest of it, and then the distribution side is just like, it's.
Well, from the legal, as a legal person,
Yeah.
I guess somebody making a very small film, in their bedroom possibly or whatever,
Right.
that the kind of really ultra low independent film that we're talking about. I mean, that's the thing, I suppose, that what can they do to protect themselves, because they haven't got the money probably to have a great big lawyer. On the other hand, if the
Right.
film suddenly becomes a success for some reason, that's possibly the most likely thing that could go wrong with a success, would I be?
Well, there's a whole series of issues, I guess, that you would look at in trying to make a determination about whether or not it's worth it from a distributor standpoint. When I was talking about, and again, this is another one of those things that I don't know if this is something that you deal with here, but the idea of errors and omissions insurance, is that something you guys deal with? Okay. From a distributor standpoint, that's something that's really important that you do have. Almost not so much the idea that it's going to protect me if something goes wrong. It gives me peace of mind. It lets me know that you're a professional filmmaker, that you've crossed your T's and dotted your I's, and you've done something like that. So that helps me out a lot. Some of the other things that you do from a legal standpoint when
that
looking at
is expensive, by the way.
it's
It's
like $10,000.
That might be your budget, right?
Well,
that we're talking
some of the
about.
other things that you think about that from a smaller film perspective is, what kind of guilds and unions do you guys have to
all
do
the
with
usual ones.
You do have all that stuff to do with too, right? Yeah. So, sometimes if for me, working with the DGA and SAG and WGA and all the other GA bullshit that you got to deal with all the time, the fact that I'm taking on movies that don't have, that aren't SAG actors, that don't have, the guilds on the rest of it, I prefer that, but the guilds don't like that. The guilds aren't happy about that at all.
What about like ratings? Like, do your movies all have to be
To submit to the MPAA?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we deal with in the States, and again, I don't know if you have this issue here, but there are a lot of, when we get into the DVD part of it, there are a lot of retailers that won't carry your film on the DVD shelf unless you've had it rated.
Right.
So, and it's expensive. It's expensive
Is
to
it?
get a film rated.
There was a whole documentary about that as well.
Yeah,
about
Kirby
how bad
Dick.
that is. Yeah.
Maybe we should get back to some
I'm sorry.
of the...
I got to go off and all
Yeah.
these crazy. I got a question back there. A lot.
Yeah.
Given that theatrical distribution is a bit shaky these days, and we're talking, I think, low-budget filmmaking or digital filmmaking, how important is it to get it onto 35mm? Because that's a huge expense. It's not important. We've found, do you have DVD cinemas in the States? I was in Oklahoma just last week, and they hadn't even heard of them. And what we've been doing there with our film, Feature Film Taking a Flyaway Express, is that we've pioneered a way of putting it on high definition using an Apple TV and taking that to the cinemas and plugging that into their projectors, you know, if you get a good cinema owner, they're right, this is really exciting, but then you get ones that go, oh, this is really complicated, I just want to put a disc in. Your cinema, what do you do? What do you project on?
Well, we still project mostly on film. However, we're trying. We have a lot of digital projectors. The issue we're having is those things are, again, ridiculously expensive. Those projectors, putting those, you know, the Sony 4Ks, and I mean, that stuff, we're talking several $100,000 to try to put it, like, for a projector. And so eventually we'll get to that place where, and I've seen it a couple years ago when we put one of our first projectors in this theater in LA. We did this test screening, and we were at the New Art in LA, and we were sitting there, and we literally, to start the film screen like this was like a big computer desktop, and you took the window or the Microsoft, you know, whatever that program is, you just double clicked it, and it was Riding Giants, the surfing movie, in HD, and it was up there on the screen. And the idea being that someday you'll be able to eliminate the cost of film prints. You'll be able to email your film to a theater, and they'll be able to just double click and play it on screen. That said, they're still a long way off. But back to, I guess the question about the idea is, you know, does it matter as far as whether you want to do it on film or like on a digibeta deck or anything like that at all? Is that?
Well, the best thing we found was this Apple TV with an MP4 file.
Oh, you're using that? Oh, that's interesting.
Which is kind of a similar process to what these digital projectors are going to do. They're just hard drives with countless files.
So, look, at the end of the day, if your film was you know, Citizen Kane 2 and it was taped together, it was Polaroids that you would tape together, it was somehow you're able to play it, somebody will play it.
Yeah.
If it's a great film, you know, no matter what it's on, and if it's a great film, you're going to find a distributor who's going to take the format and they're going to put it into every format possible in order to
which is also another infusion of cash, of course. But
the distributor will do that, absolutely. I'll pay
if
for
the
that.
film's good enough. Yeah.
But I guess back to the original concept of should you shoot in film versus shoot in HD or Super 16 or anything else, you know what? Whatever you can afford, I'd go probably the best thing that you could possibly afford.
Yeah, because you'll just blow it up afterwards.
Yeah, but shooting in HD, digitally, whatever, that's great.
or the red, if you can get one.
Any questions?
It seems to me that if you're a producer of a film, whether it's a really low budget film or whether it's actually something that has a sort of slightly bigger budget, you kind of do have to be thinking about factoring in marketing and materials or elements that you should be delivering as part of your production process, because these things often do come out of the actual production. So what are some of the things that you think that as a producer you should be kind of thinking about developing alongside your production? I mean, you're not always working necessarily closely with the distributor as you're going into production, so what are some of the things that you think that we should be
So maybe, Andy, perhaps you could start. I mean, you know, because once upon a time, I suppose your EPK and your interviews and stuff would have been it. So if it's coming to you, what do you need?
I mean, it's still the standard stuff that gets made during production, which will be, EPK, B-roll, all those kind of things. But, I mean, getting interviews with talent specifically for the web would be a good start if you do have talent in the film, and then you can start disseminating that as you're going through production, and especially if you don't have a distributor on board or even one on the horizon. And those are kind of things that you can start to get interest with. It doesn't. I mean, you could start a blog, you could start a website, you can do all those things. But I mean, again, there's time and resources, and have you got time to be in charge of that and update it and make it frequent and make it relevant and keep that thing going throughout the course of your production, however long that will be. So, I mean, those are the things that you can start to do, immediately whenever. But it's just kind of time. Time is the issue.
I would be very careful about avoiding the kind of checklist approach, and I see this. I mean, several years ago, as I was trying to kind of get started, I went and I bought like dozens and dozens of books. How to get your film seen, how to make your short film into a feature film career, And they all give these lists of everything you need, and they all say, and Andy's right, you do need all those things, and they all say, okay, this is what an EPK looks like, and this is what you need, and get this and get that. And I seriously think you got to go back to that story, because I have seen, I was working on a film, and we went to the theater when the movie was showing, when it had opened, and one of the distributor was standing there, and I said, oh yeah, we can do this video, we can do that video, and he's sort of going around interviewing people in the audience. What'd you think of the film? And they give their 2-word answer. What'd you think of the film? It was great. What'd you think of the film? And you're just sort of banging it out, and it's completely boring. And if you look at a lot of the extras that come, and it's the same old thing. And there are certain things that they worked once. They worked on one film. Especially a lot of people ask, with Four-Eyed Monsters, okay, give us a list of all the things that you did, and we'll copy that. And it doesn't work. It only worked with us because either it was the first time anybody had done it, or because it worked so uniquely with our story.
Yeah, so that's about knowing who your audience is ultimately. That's the kind of responsibility,
Sure. So I recommend, and we talk about this more on Friday, but I recommend taking a look at writing down every single possible media format you can think of. Really just reach out there in your mind and think of just everything, that bumper stickers, T-shirts, recipes, whatever, text messages, Twitter, blogs, all that stuff. Really, really go out there and say, okay, which of these is going to work best to tell the story of my film?
Yeah, it's got to be relevant to your story, hasn't it? Most studio films that we work on, we still get the same materials that come through, and it is the same boring B-roll, it's the same sound bites, it's the same talking heads.
Yeah. What you're saying is that you have to move away from those and think about things from a different angle, right?
Yeah.
You do. They could still be similar types of materials that you're doing, but it's just the way in which you do them can differ, or it can be a slightly.
Here's something very, very, very simple. Hire a really good on-set photographer.
Definitely.
Stills is great.
Yeah.
Stills is as a distributor, I demand at least 100 good stills that I can use.
Do you do studio shots, studio shoots as well, or will you just do on-set? Will you take them out of the context of the film as well?
Those, it depends, because a lot of that stuff is you want to be able to use it for DVD packaging.
Right.
You want to be able to use it for promotional
Posters and
things,
posters,
things like that. So a good photographer is something that's really, I think, is important.
Sure. And you can use that. You can be blogging those photos as you go. Again within the constraints of don't give away the ending. But
So Andy, what does make a campaign
Sing.
good?
Yeah.
And can you think of one? Maybe you can mention one in particular.
Yeah,
that
the one that is the big standout campaign is and the biggest film, one of the biggest films of the year has been The Dark Knight. And the way in which they did it was so clever. They started a year and a half out, and obviously it's Warner Brothers. They've got the resources. They've got this. They've got a franchise that has this huge backstory as well. But all they did was simply connect a series of very, very simple websites and invent an alternate reality game that led up to, which is basically just a plot. It was literally, so you're all filmmakers. You've got a story. So all they did was thread it back, a few steps and make a story that led through to the start of the film. And this was a series of very simple one-page websites with a bit of imagery on it. And what would happen was that they'd launch a website and it would challenge the audience to go and find something or do something on the site, or maybe even go into the real world and find a deck of cards at a comic shop in your location around the world. It was very, very meticulously planned, but as a principle, it was very, very simple. They didn't spend millions on the actual development of the websites. That was all very, very cheaply done. And it looks like it was knocked together by a student. But what it did was involve and reward the audience throughout, leading up to. And it went quiet some months. It wasn't a full-on kind of assault every single week or every single month. What they did when they had a bit of new material to share, they involved the audience again. And you didn't have to stay along for the whole ride. But what did happen is because it picked up such a great momentum and the ideas were good behind it. The media would pick up on it and talk about it, and networks would talk about it, and you didn't even have to be involved in the thing. You'd get Empire Online saying, the next Batman site has gone up, and you can check it out here, and this is the reward you'll get for going to it. But it was dead simple.
Yeah.
Granted, they had the budget, they had the time to kind of develop it, but I mean, principally, it's...
And there are a lot of things that you can do that. Well, first of all, most of these things that you mentioned are very engaging. As compared to say like a billboard, which you don't know if somebody sees it while they're driving or they don't see it. You don't know. Versus say something online where you can get somebody's email address, or at least you have a view count.
We can measure the hits,
or they can kind of subscribe to get the next thing. There's that, and it's engaging also in the story point of view. You want to know what's happening next. But also, there's a lot of things that, kind of what these ARGs are great. And a lot of these things, you're not going to necessarily get a lot of people participating, but people are going to talk about it. We showed our film in Second Life. Do you guys know what that is?
Yeah.
It was the first film, fully screened in a virtual world. It was really cool. It was. It was.
That's sort of novel Second Life, but how did that work?
It was, we worked with the Sundance Channel on that, and with a company called the Electric Sheep Company, which is their virtual world consultants, I guess. And, they came to us and they had built a screening room, a virtual screening room in Second Life for Sundance Channel. And it, it kind of looked like this room, and you get a big wall and you stream the movie so that it projects.
It's just like a media player. It just looks, that's
and you kind of like turn your head in the game, and the screen kind of does that, and you have people sitting in the room and they're chatting. It's really neat, actually. And one of the directors, Susan, was kind of chatting somebody, answering somebody's question while the movie was playing, and somebody else types like, "Shh, I'm trying to watch the movie." There was a lot of really cool things. It was way cool, even cooler than it sounds, because you start to see some of these social interactions that happen, which again I think is always going back to that social aspect to raise the value of the experience. But we had, and they sort of simultaneously streamed the movie into about a dozen or 15 locations throughout Second Life. And we had a few hundred people, like 400 or 500 people, watching this thing, which for an internet event is not that big. For an ARG, you can have a small number of people. But what ended up happening was that a lot of blogs wrote about it, and a lot of, a couple of, I guess legitimate type news stories were written about it. So the exposure is much greater than just the actual number of people participating. Which I guess is probably,
they talk about amplification, and that's what those kind of things can do. I mean, it's not the actual event, and still traditionally it is the trailer that gets, it's still the mainstay of an online campaign, and will still have the most views out of any kind of AV material that you put out there.
But even we're seeing there's a lot of room for variability in the structure of the trailer.
Absolutely, there's developments in software all the time that can now tell you how many times people go to a certain point in a trailer, at which point people respond to in a trailer. So as a marketing kind of exercise, you're starting to get the technology that does work at the moment is the ones that give you as a filmmaker or a distributor that kind of knowledge back from the consumer and says, okay, at this point this isn't working, or at this point it's really good. So
I think I saw a question over here. Is there still a question there? Yes?
I was just wondering, in terms of new media and the e-marketing things, what sort of developments have recently sprung up? We've just talked about trailers are still really effective, and you sort of touched on social network and things. What are the new exciting things that are working and are kind of exposing the product to audiences and things like that we can...
me and Brian have been talking for the last 24 hours really about Twitter. I mean, social networks are, of course, they have these huge audiences now, Facebook and MySpace and Bebo. But in terms of what the studios are doing with them, it's very reactionary. It's asking a lot to kind of get these networkers to buy into. They're creating these widgets or mini microsites that live on your social network page that you can embed in your social networks. But we're finding, and I've been guilty as anyone of trying to do these and make these work. But we're finding that a lot of people in these places are actually there to network. Yeah, they will get involved with brands to a certain extent, but in a lot of environments, Facebook especially, they don't actually really want to be getting into that. They're actually there to be, conversing with friends or checking out photos or updating their status and that kind of thing. It's very, very tough, especially with something as transient as a film brand, to get them engaged in it for that 6 to 8 week period that's really crucial for you. I mean, for Coca-Cola to go into Facebook, or for Shell or whatever, these brands that are there and they have a consistent product, it's a lot. They've got a lot more time to kind of build up an audience using those tools. But I mean, something like Twitter, for instance, which is basically it's like a mini update blog. I mean, literally, you would just it just is a website that says what you're doing right now. It's like a status.
How many people?
Does anyone know about it?
Sorry?
Does anybody use
Twitter.
it? One person in the back. That's it. Two, 3.
It's just a way of keeping people abreast of what you're doing.
Right.
really.
It's sort of like a little, 140 character status update message.
But Paramount have just started to use
Yeah.
it for literally being a mouthpiece for their company,
Right.
and they will, as well as kind of doing the outreach kind of things like saying, okay, Eagle Eye's opening today, or Eagle Eye is #1 at the box office, and all that kind of regular stuff that comes out. What it can do is point around the web and say, okay, Michael Bay's going to be on ET.com talking about his next big movie. Go check it out there, and it's just a really great way of disseminating your content out there very easily. And what happens with Twitter is you can follow people, and they can follow you, so they can see what you're talking about, and you can see what they're talking about. And it's a great way of kind of following. You can then follow your consumers down the line and see what they're getting into. And
So, like, I might say,
it's an insight into what your consumers are doing. And
Timothy O'Brien is starting to shoot his new movie.
Exactly.
And then you go through and find out what it is.
Or we're shooting a crowd scene on Saturday at 2:00. Like, anybody who wants to volunteer and be an extra, like, show up, which is
great.
now
That's
you've
amazing
engaged
tool.
your audience. I mean, that brings up crowdsourcing, which is a whole other thing. But Twitter is a great example of like kind of a larger breed of tools which solve a whole range of problems. Because one thing you were talking about, you were mentioning, like, does somebody want to install a whole Facebook application for your movie? There's that it's really like a design challenge of getting somebody to jump over hurdles to engage with you, which is just, you want to allow them to do that and let them commit, but there's definitely like a ramping up. You want to let people engage kind of passively for a while, and then they'll sort of, as the stakes get higher, as they get more and more interested, and it becomes more social, and they see their friends are doing it, they might kind of come into that. And what these tools like Twitter allow you to do is, it's just useful for everybody. So many people want to be on Twitter anyway, so the kind of cost of the time cost of getting involved with your film by subscribing to their Twitter channel is so super small. And what I would say, the next few kind of web presences that I'm putting together for these different brands I'm working on tend to use a lot of tools like that: Twitter, Flickr, YouTube, things where, and this solves the other problem of kind of the workload for you as a filmmaker, is that they're individual tools that are really great at kind of publishing one thing. Flickr is super, super easy to have a really good, high quality way to post photos, right? And every photo gets its own link. You don't have to sign up with a password to be able to see the photos if you don't want to, and kind of you put out something in Twitter, you put out stuff in Flickr, you put out stuff in YouTube, you put out stuff in all these other sites, which allow your audience to engage with you on that site if they're comfortable with that site. And then one of the software projects I was talking about before that I'm working on will allow you to feed all that stuff through your website so that it then kind of populates that data and gives you more kind of ways to engage. So it sort of gives you more but lowers the cost of entry for both you and your audience.
For all the talk of kind of dialogue now and not a passive marketing way where it's just a studio or a distributor shouting at the consumer, they're still using technology in that way. It's still trying to force the issue a little bit. And things like Twitter do lessen that, and it is all about kind of the buying. People still haven't got they've got access to all these great new medias, but they've still got little or less time than they used to. So it's kind of making that kind of bridge simple for them to get involved with your film.
There's a question here.
Yeah. I was going to ask about how all these things interface with traditional press campaigns, and how effective the old like column inches of coverage, number of items, whatever, is in the marketing of a film these days. I've just been involved with one in the pictures now, in the theatres at the moment. And one of the things that you always come across is we can't have long lead magazines with this screening because, then we won't get it when we need it for there. And does a lot of this campaigning have an impact on the conventional press interest?
Well, that was actually going to be my follow-up question to these guys too, because I'm not aware of anything that I have seen that sort of has published or said, the viral marketing or these types of things have proven to be, monetarily successful as far as what happened with ticket sales or views or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
For the traditional specialty film, independent film, whatever you want to prefer to call it, these films, at least in the United States, they're still driven by reviews and by word of mouth. And the idea being that the only people that you're going to trust if you're going to spend 2 hours to go see a French subtitled film will be Manola Dargis in the New York Times, or your best friend who's like, oh, you have to see this film. So that's still, for better or for worse, is the stuff that drives these types of films. We talk about the ad in the New York Times and the stuff like that. Complete waste of money as far as I'm concerned, because these people, this again, it's still, I read that review or my best friend tells me that I need to go see this film. That said, you guys know more about the viral and the, I don't know.
But still online, one of the first things I'll do is go to a review collaboration site to check out the worth of a film. I mean, something like Rotten Tomatoes will still aggregate old world media and new world media as well together. So, I mean, they do coexist in that respect and coexist quite happy. But in terms of the actual facets of offline publicity and online publicity, a lot of the time they mirror it. We do mirror each other. We do exclusives. Exclusives, for instance, are still kind of,
as far as like the traditional.
What I'm really asking is, do they have a negative impact, or how do you strategize so that...
Do you mean do they have a negative impact on your ability to get the column inches? Is that what
I don't see? I mean,
Or how do you strategize to marry them so that they complement each other?
Well, in a way, especially if you've got a screening program kind of coming up and you can't get in a long link, then doing it with either that publication's website or another website is going to facilitate you getting what you want and getting your screening programs
and
filled.
definitely have every single screening time on your movie's website. I think it's just, I mean, I can't tell you we're doing a website for Honey Dripper. I mean, how many emails we got that were like, okay, great, what time and place can I see this movie? And it's like, finally we just put up a big Google map with a pin in every city and a list of the times that said this is where it's playing in your city. I mean, it's just, having it just reference information on your own site is very helpful in itself.
Yeah, the ways I've seen it negatively impact is when you have lined up, an exclusive shot of the movie with a trade or a newspaper, and that gets leaked online, or some, those are the kind of things that really do have a negative impact on kind of traditional press and media, and that's something that we're always being asked to kind of go out and police by the studios or by the distributor.
I guess what I'm asking is, if you're developing a marketing plan, how do you feed them all together, or do you feed them all together, or do you work just?
No, we work hand in hand with the offline PR or the studio's PR team, and it will be kind of looking at what.
What's the considerations? What are the considerations?
I mean, it'll be looking at what elements work best in which media, I guess. But I mean, still, if it's talent driven, then you're still online. It's still going to have to wait for the big press titles and the big magazines to in turn, and if you've got a junket and you've only got an hour with Keanu Reeves or Tom Cruise, the online portion of that is going to be small. It's going to have to be the big magazines are still taken care of. So for all the cries of death of old media, it's still it's still valued, like Jason says. The reviewers, especially the reviewers, especially in the UK, there's a distrust still of online reviewers and their professionalism and their dedication and their ability to kind of write a decent
and there's
review.
Still, and especially if something is star driven, like World's Fastest Indian. It's a star driven film in the United States. We did a Super Bowl ad. I mean, that film, we had a trailer during the biggest watched event in the United States for that film. And Anthony Hopkins, he went on David Letterman, he went on Jay Leno to talk about the film. And if you can still, if there's a way to have that happen, that's, I mean, like it or not, that's more effective than anything.
Sure.
So it still does
TV
exist.
and old press is
still is there.
Yeah, I agree.
It definitely is still there, but I mean, there are certain elements that you have some control over and certain that you don't. I mean, I don't know how to get. I mean, maybe somebody does. I don't know how to get Manola to write a positive review of a film she doesn't like. But
she shouldn't.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's
But can
that's
you
fun.
get round Manola? That was the
Yeah,
question that
that's
occurred to me. Can you get to your
Stephen
your
Holden.
best friend, people?
Right.
The
Well,
word of mouth and
Maybe.
cut Manola Dargis out of it.
For an independent film, it's hard.
It's harder,
very,
but
very hard.
She's a very influential film critic for the New York
Right.
Times.
I go back to that idea of that story arc. Okay, just like you have a story arc for your movie, you have a story arc for your whole publicity and marketing campaign. And it's like, I'll give you an example. One of the first things I did when I started working with Aaron and Susan on Four Eyed Monsters, I said, let's work out our story arc the same way you do for a movie, just like Robert McKee and Joseph Campbell, right? And the phase one, in this sort of timeline of the movie of the whole brand really was the plot of the movie, right? Which is a true story. It's about the filmmakers. The filmmakers are in it, and it kind of it becomes that like first story arc of the 12 steps of the hero's journey or whatever. If this small scale, Aaron and Susan meet each other and they struggle on the scale of their relationship. And phase two was, kind of addressed in the video podcast episodes. And it was, Aaron and Susan having succeeded at, meeting each other and creating the relationship, now are sort of battling the slightly larger world of getting the film made. And then phase three was, what took place in the media, the chosen media was more of our video news updates and articles in various, blogs and other journalistic outlets, was sort of, the filmmakers versus the industry and the world. And it kind of follows that storyline, and we would see, we would be interviewed, or they would be interviewed for some blog, or, whether it was like a movie blog, a mainstream movie blog or whatever, or, a magazine or something like that. We would kind of, you give that interview and you tell they're going to sort of fight with you a little bit, and they want the story to look like that, and they'll come to you with questions, kind of leading questions that they want the story to look like that, and you kind of fight back a little bit. But, it's like anything, you sort of plan it, and then you kind of, some curveballs are thrown at you, and having that plan allows you to deviate from the plan. So the great, the example I love is if we were doing a screening, some event, right? Let's say it was a traditional theatrical week, which we did. And, we would know going into that, okay, if this thing goes really well, our reaction to it is, see, look, we can do really, really great things as an independent, no-budget filmmakers, and, that's because the audience is helping out, and we'd sort of play it that way. And if the screening went really, really badly, we'd say, see, we told you, the man is keeping us down, and it's, whichever way makes for the best story,
I think a short answer to your question, or at least a feeble attempt at answering your question, would be the ideal scenario from a distributor's perspective would be to have the online component sort of complement the traditional, press, television, the things like that.
And I think if you can have the filmmaker, the director involved as much as possible. I mean, I think any of the
filmmakers, yeah.
But if and sort of looking at it as a story, I think is a good way to keep the director involved in that.
I mean, I guess with online is that the feeling from distributors and studios is that it's more malleable than traditional press and traditional media. So you'd set that first, and then the online campaign can complement it, but it can also change to suit it.
So what if you've got the situation that you possibly have with a lot of independent films where you don't have Anthony Hopkins or Keanu or, a recognisable person, and you also don't have a property, i.e. Batman, is that when this stuff can help you more than it... Well, how can it help you? I mean, can you think of a sort of campaign for that kind of movie that you think was distinguished?
I mean, one film that we've recently worked on, I know Jason was involved with, was Man on Wire, which is a fantastic movie if you haven't seen it. But there's no star in it. It's kind of a docudrama. And
it's a sort of high concept.
It's a very high concept docudrama, and obviously it was reviewed wonderfully well. But online, it's kind of like, what are you going to do here?
The best reviewed, in fact,
best reviewed film in the year.
Best reviewed film in the history of I think Metacritic.
One of those. This is the film about the man who walked the tightrope between the World Trade Center buildings.
But in terms of getting an online audience excited with that, we had very little, but we did have access to the filmmakers. So we kind of played up on that, and then it was in terms of exclusives. It was kind of giving the trailer to one of the biggest portals in the world, Yahoo, as an exclusive for 5 days, got us on their homepage. So it was kind of doing that. It's the oldest trick in the book, giving someone an exclusive. But that's what worked for us on this film. It wasn't star driven. It wasn't a flashy film. It's a hard audience to reach online. It's one that we always really, there's always distributors who will go, this is an online film, and it'll be a 15 to 30 male-dominated sex or horror or drug comedy. But in these kind of films, it's very, very hard. But the baby boomer audience are on Facebook. They are on social networks. It's just how do you reach them? They're very infrequent.
Well, to be like brutally honest, it's a really, really difficult. I don't want to say bleak, but it's a really bad time for independent films right now, especially on the distribution side of it. There's been several companies, specialty divisions and standalone companies in the United States that have been shut down in this past year. Picture House has gone away. Paramount Vantage, Warner Independent, Think Film is about to go away. And what's happening is that it's becoming so increasingly expensive to release a film. And especially if you're trying to release something that doesn't have those elements, doesn't have Anthony Hopkins, doesn't have even Man on Wire has this story that a lot of people live through and they're aware of and they know about it. That I think that you're gonna see there. It's already happened. That there's going to be a lot of distributors are going to be unwilling to take risks on films that don't have packageable elements. That's just the way it's going to be for a little while until something comes along and it hits again. And the question is, how are you going to do it to have that opportunity for it to hit? We're such a pack following business. When Lionsgate did all those silly Saw, torture or whatever movies, everyone wanted to get into that business. When Blair Witch, became this big, huge thing, everyone wanted to do stuff like that. The idea that the faux, mockumentaries, everyone had to do mockumentaries. We're such we follow what everyone else does, and we're waiting for it to recover and figure out what that thing is. And that's why you see at a lot of film festivals now. A lot of films are going unsold. A lot of good films that are going unsold. And trust me, I didn't go to Toronto this year because I knew we weren't going to buy film. And I knew that we could wait until afterwards and I could get a film for no money up front because there were people who are desperate to get distribution. I had a meeting with a major Hollywood producer a few weeks ago who was talking about, we were talking about the state of the industry. And he says, and this guy's been around for a long time, he says that the studios are going to only, there's no reason for the studios to spend any money to distribute a independent film, anything that costs below $20 million to produce. There's just no incentive for them to do it. The only films that they should be doing and will be doing are these big star-driven tentpole type films, because even though they cost a lot of money to produce, it costs a lot of money to market, they are so packageable and they're so marketable, and you know exactly what you're getting into when you have that. And he used this example that if you look at when Batman did $500 million domestically, that the stock price for Time Warner didn't move an inch. But if one of those if they start doing like what happened with Sony, in the 80s or whatever, when they started doing when movies started failing, they had to sell to the Japanese. So the idea was that the studios are going to just completely eliminate any idea of risk, and these are the risky type of films for them.
Right. Which
it sounds counterintuitive, the idea that they're spending a lot of money, but it just is. And so, God, that's just a long-winded answer. I don't even remember what the question was. The point being, it's like a ridiculously difficult time for independent, small specialty films, unfortunately.
Well, it's the old showbiz axiom. You've got to throw money out the window to have it come through the door or something.
Well,
There's a question.
Just an interesting point following up on that. So you're talking about the North American territory,
Yes.
and you work in Canada as well.
Yes.
But how much of it, or how many films then would you look at and say it's just not worth it to release in North America and we'll sell to the rest of the world and sort of recoup that way? I mean, it's obviously more viable for us in New Zealand to look at a European sale or the rest of the world North America is really expensive. I mean, Four Weddings and a Funeral, I think, released in North America and probably wiped out any profits that it probably made out of the UK into Europe due to the costs. So maybe it's just about looking at your strategy and working out what territory is important.
But I think what you mean as far as like doing the production and doing foreign pre-sales, or
yeah, well, I suppose where your production budget comes from, what pre-sales you've got in line, but you as business peers saying, well, I could advise that perhaps we won't release in North America. Why don't we just
what could happen though, I think in North America, or what's happening and will continue to happen for the foreseeable future is I'm getting movies for nothing. Movies that cost $4 million up front 3 years ago are no advanced deals now. And unfortunately, we're putting them out there, and you're trying to be as economical as you possibly can. Here's the thing. Okay, this goes back to the idea of the smashing of the windows. Here's the model that we're using now, and I think if World's Fastest Indian had come out in the United States today at Magnolia, this is the model we would have done. We have this model now called Ultra VOD. And the big thing that I think a lot of the people in America and probably eventually the world think is going to save the film business is the idea of video on demand, meaning that I can sit at home and I can click a button and I can watch that movie. And so what we have done was the film, the largest film that we've done it with is a film called Flawless with Michael Caine and Demi Moore. And that film was available on VOD through your home cable system before it was available in theaters, but it was at a very high price point. So it would cost like $25. And then it was available like that for 2 weeks. And then it was in theaters. And when it became in theaters, the price point came down a little bit. And then when it eventually started moving out of the theaters, the price point came down again. And what we found is it didn't cannibalize the theaters as much as people expected. It did like $2.5 million at the box office. But it did crazy business on VOD. And the idea that people...
The $25 views were selling?
It did crazy business. And so that what we've kind of learned from that, and what a lot of people are coming and approaching us now as far as doing films like that is, because they're looking at the bottom line. And they're thinking, how am I going to get my money back? And I'm not sitting behind all these crazy expenses. So the idea of making this available to people who want to sit at home on a Friday night because they want to put their kids to bed. They don't want to get a babysitter and go to the movie theater. Well,
$25 is actually quite a good price.
Yeah, if you're taking 4 or 5 people around to your house.
Yeah. I'm saying there's like all these other things that are happening. And so we've been able to do this because we own a theater chain. The major theater chains won't play these movies while they're available on video on demand, which goes back to the very first thing you're talking about at the very beginning.
So what we need is vertical integration.
So what's happening, it's weird because it's almost coming full circle because there were these antitrust laws passed years and years ago which said the studio couldn't own a theater chain. Well, we may end up having to come all the way back to that now to be able to put it down in this model.
Right. Well, I think everything you're saying is absolutely right, and I think it sort of points out, I mean, like what you were saying, I mean, the studios, they're sitting and they're waiting. And while they're waiting, there's tremendous opportunity to innovate, right? I mean, and that's what you're talking about, because there's so much. The industry, you want to tell your story in the best way that suits the audience. And the industry, the old way of doing it, doesn't want you to do that. Maybe the best way to reach your audience is to do online streaming or VOD or whatever before the theatrical. And the kind of these systems, there's so many things that are like archaic that they just exist because they have always been that way. But nothing has actually ever always been that way and this happens every single generation. They go, oh no, wait, the way we're doing business, it doesn't work anymore. We have to change the laws so that now that you're not allowed to, do it in, to support the old way of doing business. There's so much opportunity and exactly what you did. I mean, you recognize the value, like what does the audience want there? They want to not have to get a babysitter, and they're willing to pay more for it.
And the next step is I've spent the past year doing all of the new media deals. So I've closed a deal with iTunes, with Xbox service, with Amazon, which has their own service, like everything that you can possibly think of. And so the next step is going to be how do these systems figure out a way to get the thing to the television set? Because the issue that people are having now is, well, I don't want to watch this thing on my iPod. I don't want to watch this on my computer screen. How am I going to get this to the TV set? So what you're seeing is there's a company in the United States called Netflix, which I'm sure several of you have heard of. It's called QuickFlix in Australia. Different company, but the same concept. Netflix has done a deal with I think it's LG. And so the LG television sets that come out in the next couple of years are going to have this built-in sort of video-on-demand service. I think Sony did a deal with somebody else.
And even YouTube did a deal with the TV manufacturer.
Sony is saying it now in their ads. In
YouTube
Rolling Stone this
is,
month,
right.
there was an ad and it said, watch computer.
Right.
And it was their HD computer monitor acting as a TV screen.
So that's going to be the next step. The idea being the tent poles are going to be the theatrical experience, and this mid-range, whatever it might be, is going to be this video on demand, at home, watch it on my flat screen TV. That's going to be like sort of, I mean, that's what we're all thinking, that's going to save, these mid-range films.
But if LG have an arrangement with someone,
Yes.
you have to have an LG TV to watch it.
Right. Well, Sony has done a deal with somebody else too.
I think that they're going to cut their throats. It's not going to work because...
Well, it's one of those things that needs to settle, and then
Everyone's trying to do deals.
everyone will do their own thing, and then it will come down to the one or
And
two.
you'll end up with the beta machine or the VHS.
You can always connect your computer to your plasma to your TV.
Yeah,
Right,
But
exactly.
then there's
And
output
on the
issues.
computer, you can buy anything.
But you're way smarter than I am because I have no clue how to do that.
Most consumers don't have a clue how
Well,
to do
know
that.
there's a whole other thing with the...
Yeah, I know they do. You're
can't
totally
do it.
right. But the ideas behind all these things is they want to minimize the number of boxes or wires or everything you possibly have.
There's a ton of different companies, and they're all incompatible right now, trying to get movies on your TV over the internet. And I want to go back to what you asked before about kind of do you make 35mm prints and things like that. And there's kind of, you have this fight going in two directions. One is like this sort of top down, standardize everything approach. Like you get one format to deliver in and one form, to project in. And and we all standardize on that format, and it's a really high quality format. And has certain, it's nice when everybody kind of agrees. But your problem is that one, that format is invariably controlled by some very tiny selection of extremely large companies. And two is that you're locked into that for like a decade, and you can't incrementally innovate in little bits at a time here and there. And the other approach is just sort of the bottom up, sort of open standard approach, which I'm a huge advocate of, and you're seeing this in digital projection as well as you're going to see this on kind of set top boxes and things like that. If you have, say, like there are open source video formats like OGG is one of the media containers, for example, or even QuickTime, which is still controlled by Apple, but it's sort of more widely used. If you can have just everything as a computer. And it can play things at different resolutions and different bit rates and different compressors and different media formats and things like that. It becomes so easy to deal with that, and much easier to kind of innovate bit by bit. I mean, we've projected on DVD, on mini DV, off of laptops with QuickTime Player, off of Apple TVs and things like that. And there's no reason that shouldn't apply across all devices.
I mean, the computer hardware manufacturers have been making media centers for years
Sure,
now, so
yeah.
they've been waiting for it to happen.
Yeah, like you say, the computer can handle other stuff.
Well, look, I think we've come. We could obviously go on for a very long time, and some of it would be very exciting, and some's kind of slightly scary. But I hope you've enjoyed this taste of it. I know Brian is going to be blogging, Twittering, and generally uploading things, and you're going to put some of the stuff from Auckland on your site, right?
Yes.
Perhaps you'd like to tell people what the site is, so that maybe when that will be there, and they might be able to look at some of the stuff from Auckland as well.
Okay, yeah. It's just Charles.com. It's my last name, CHIRLS. I don't know if is there like a paper that went out or something, but
it might be, but I might be on there. But anyway, Charles.com.
But that might be after I get back to the States, depending
So in
on my
a couple of weeks or something.
Yeah, a couple of weeks.
Yeah, well, listen, I hope you'd show your appreciation in the normal way, and also I'd like to thank the Film Archive for hosting us here.